Hey there, YouTube fam! We're back with another daily roundup, and boy, do we have some hot and fresh updates for you. So, let's jump right into it. We've got some intriguing comments directly from the horse's mouth. Lieutenant General Daniel Hagar, spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces, he's confirmed that their forces have indeed breached the front lines of Hamas. Hagar didn't hold back as he shed light on the ground operations up north in the Gaza Strip, talking about the seamless collaboration between their ground, naval, and air forces to make it happen. If that wasn't enough, Hagar also dropped the bombshell that an airstrike managed to pick off a big fish, a Hamas leader, effectively putting a halt to a dangerous Hamas anti-tank unit. This, he says, will definitely put a wrench in Hamas's future war plans. Hagar called out Hamas for spreading fake news about the conflict, swearing to keep the truth flowing from their end. He gave the example of the Al-Madani hospital incident, promising to continue releasing hard evidence like they had in that case. Switching gears to U.S. affairs, according to Reuters, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is scheduled to meet with Israeli government bigwigs, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, on November 10th. Mar Miller, the U.S. State Department's spokesperson, has mentioned that Blinken will be stressing on Israel's right to self-defense under international law and the importance of minimizing civilian casualties. They'll be also touching upon the humanitarian aid efforts. Meanwhile, Blinken might also be dropping by Ankara on the same day, as per Turkish Foreign Ministry sources, but we're still waiting on a confirmation from the U.S. State Department. President Biden, during a rally in Minnesota, insisted the need for a ceasefire, and also hinted on his persuasion tactics with Netanyahu to halt the fighting temporarily. He acknowledged the high stakes and complexity of the conflict for both Israel and the Muslim world. While the White House doesn't seem keen on an immediate ceasefire, they are suggesting a temporary truce to get humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza. Israel, by the way, has been tight-lipped about a possible ceasefire, keeping their focus on dismantling Hamas. Speaking of humanitarian aid, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has issued a dire warning of an impending humanitarian catastrophe with Israel's escalating military plans. However, there might be a glimmer of hope as a massive convoy of 30 aid trucks entered Gaza on October 29th, marking the biggest humanitarian aid entry the conflict-ridden region has seen so far. Well, that's all for today, YouTube fam. Stay tuned for more of these daily roundups, and remember, let's keep our conversations engaging and insightful. According to a press release from the U.S. Department of Defense, the agency is seeking approval and budget allocation from the U.S. Congress for the development of a modernized version of the B-61 nuclear gravity bomb, designated as the B-6113. This project is being carried out in close coordination with the National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA, and the U.S. Department of Energy. The B-6113 will be deployed using modern aircraft and has a destructive power over 24 times that of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima during World War II. The new nuclear bomb from the United States is intended to replace some of the existing B-61-7 nuclear bombs in the U.S. nuclear stockpile. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, Ron Plum, affirmed that the B-6113 is a reasonable step to address the challenges in a highly complex security environment. He noted that while it provides added flexibility, its production will not increase the total number of nuclear weapons in the U.S. stockpile. Plum emphasized that this plan reflects the evolving security landscape and the increasing threats from potential adversaries. However, the Pentagon clarified that this decision is not in response to any specific current event, but is rather a reflection of the ongoing assessment of the security environment, as outlined in the 2022 Nuclear Posture Review. The B-6113 project is built upon the extended life program of the B-6112, with modern safety, security, and accuracy features. The B-6113 is expected to have a comparable yield to the B-61-7, while the B-6112 is a tactical nuclear weapon with a yield ranging from 0.3 to 50 kilotons, and the B-61-7 is a strategic nuclear bomb with a yield of up to 340 kilotons. The B-61 can be airdropped from various platforms, including the B-1B Lancer, B-2 Spirit, and B-52 Stratofortress bombers. The F-15, F-16, and F-35 fighter aircraft are also being tested for their capability to carry and deploy the B-61 bomb, although this capability has not been officially assessed. Nuclear weapons are classified into three categories, and airdrop nuclear weapons are one branch of the triad, with the other two being intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, deployed on land or on submarines. Recently, the United States conducted a test of the Minuteman III, the latest in a series of tests, to demonstrate the capabilities of its nuclear weapons. According to Pentagon spokesperson General Par Ryder, this test was held at Vandenberg Space Force Base in Southern California. He noted that the Minuteman III was launched from a silo without a warhead. Russia conducted a similar test of the Minuteman III nuclear missile in response to the U.S. test, and General Ryder clarified that this test was carried out as scheduled and as part of a routine process. However, the timing coincided with increased political tension due to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict and the Israel-Hamas conflict. In response to these conflicts, the U.S. had canceled or postponed at least 2 ICBM tests last year, expressing concerns about potential misunderstandings by Russia and China. In a recent development, General Ryder updated reporters on a series of drone and missile attacks on U.S. bases in the Middle East. He reported 27 attacks, including 16 in Iraq and 11 in Syria. 6 of these attacks occurred after the U.S. struck 2 sites in eastern Syria. Since then, no attacks have resulted in U.S. military casualties or damage to infrastructure at U.S. bases. The earlier U.S. airstrikes targeted locations related to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, in Syria, and were a response to attacks by Iran-backed militia groups on U.S. military personnel in the region. The U.S. attacks demonstrated the Biden administration's determination to deter such hostile actions in the future. The U.S. aims to prevent further hostilities while maintaining a delicate balance. The attacks are intended to discourage Iran's support for these groups and prevent further escalation in the region. Meanwhile, the U.S. continues its efforts to avoid exacerbating tensions in the area and inciting a larger conflict. President Joe Biden has directed these attacks within a narrow scope to make it clear that the U.S. will not tolerate such attacks and will protect its military personnel and interests. According to the press release from the U.S. Department of Defense, they are working on obtaining approval and budget allocation from the U.S. Congress for the development of a modernized version of the B-61 nuclear gravity bomb, called the B-6113. This project is being carried out in close coordination with the National Nuclear Security Agency, NNSA, a branch of the U.S. Department of Energy. The B-6113 will be deployed using modern aircraft and will have a significantly higher destructive power, exceeding 24 times that of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima during World War II. The new nuclear bomb from the United States will replace some of the existing B-6117 bombs in the country's current nuclear arsenal. Ron Plum, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, emphasized that the B-6113 is a reasonable step to address challenges in a highly complex security environment. However, the production of the B-6113 will not increase the total number of nuclear weapons in the U.S. stockpile, as stated by Mr. Plum. He pointed out that this plan reflects the changing security environment and the increasing threats from potential adversaries. The U.S. government has decided to pursue the B-6113 project based on an extended timeline of the B-6112 program, with modern safety, security, and precision features. The B-6113 is expected to have a destructive capability equivalent to that of the B-6117, which had a yield ranging from 0.3 to 50 kilotons, while the B-6117 is a tactical nuclear weapon with a yield of up to 340 kilotons, first designed in 1963. The B-61 bomb is an air-dropped thermonuclear weapon in the U.S. nuclear arsenal, used by various bomber aircraft, such as the B-1B Lancer, B-2 Spirit, and B-52 Stratofortress. The B-61 bomb can also be integrated with tactical fighter aircraft like the F-15, F-16, and F-35. Although the official evaluation of this capability is pending, nuclear weapons dropped from aircraft are one of the 3 branches of the U.S. nuclear triad, alongside intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SLBMs. In a recent development, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin emphasized that these actions are separate from the conflict between Israel and Hamas. The U.S. aims to prevent a wider conflict, but if Iran-backed militia groups continue to target U.S. interests, additional actions will be taken to protect U.S. forces. There have been discussions between U.S. and Israeli officials about the establishment of an international peacekeeping force for Gaza if Israel were to eliminate the Hamas movement. The U.S. military may be part of the force. In recent days, Israel has intensified its attacks in Gaza, and Washington and Tel Aviv have considered various scenarios for the region's future. One plan being discussed is temporarily transferring oversight of Gaza to regional nations with military support from the U.S., the UK, Germany, and France, and possibly Arab nations like the Arab League or the United Arab Emirates. While many officials stress that negotiations are still in the early stages, recent comments from U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken hinted at potential U.S. involvement in these plans. Blinken spoke during a Senate hearing, acknowledging that they cannot reverse the current situation with Hamas controlling Gaza, and they also cannot allow Israel to govern or control Gaza. There are various possibilities being carefully considered, but he did not provide specific details about these plans. Meanwhile, Israel believes that the international community, especially the U.S., should help establish a new security arrangement if they succeed in eliminating Hamas. Israel doesn't want to be responsible for the daily lives in Gaza and is considering transferring management to a third party. In a report by Bloomberg, one plan under consideration involves implementing a temporary international peacekeeping force for Gaza, following a similar model to the 1979 Egypt-Israel peace treaty, where a multinational force and observers, MFO, oversaw the Sinai Peninsula region. A government official suggested that Israel sees this idea as a viable option. Another possibility is that the United Nations could be granted temporary management rights over Gaza. Despite Israel viewing this plan as impractical, it aligns with their goal of creating a new security regime. In the face of this complex situation, U.S. President Joe Biden is cautious about committing U.S. troops, but is open to exploring options. The issue of establishing a sovereign Palestinian state after the conflict has not been discussed in detail during recent talks. The recent outbreak of violence in Gaza followed the Hamas movement's cross-border attack on October 10th, resulting in about 1,400 casualties in Israel, mostly civilians. For several weeks, the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, has continued airstrikes in the densely populated Gaza Strip, resulting in over 8,000 casualties. On October 29th, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that Israel's counteroffensive against Hamas had entered its second phase, with Israeli soldiers and tanks advancing deeper into Gaza. He stated that the conflict would be prolonged and challenging, framing it as their second war for independence, with a determination to protect their homeland and no intention of retreat.